This video is going to show how we convert a corridor to a train model and ultimately an XML file in 3 different methods. This first method is going to look at creating a train model from a top proposed mesh. To do that, when we are in our corridor file, we simply come to our corridor and we select the design stage, final top mesh. With that processed, our top mesh is shown in our 3D view. And I suggest at this point to open or create a new file to generate your train model in. And so I have one here already done called mesh top surface 3d.dgn. So I'm going to open that file. It's a 3D file. And I simply reference in what we just created with our top mesh. And so I'll do a fit view here. And we have a couple other 3-dimensional lines that came across, and that's okay. We won't be adding those to the train model. One of those is a right-of-way line. So what we want to do is we want to do a couple things. Before we need to extract the mesh boundary, because by default the mesh doesn't have a boundary. And so we simply go up to our MicroStation Mesh Tools, and I'm just going to open the toolbox here. This is a simple process. There's a process in here under the tools that is right here, extract boundary, and just follow the prompts. Says select the mesh and then accept, and it's going to use it whatever MicroStation active symbology is there to create that boundary. Now we have a boundary around the mesh edge that we'll add to the train model here in just a minute. And so at this point we simply go to create our train, and so we'll go down to create a train from elements. And we select our mesh, and then we can do the boundary now, but I want to show you what happens when we don't do the boundary. So I'm going to just hit reset, and we're going to do the mesh as soft break lines, move slivers, and notice how we get these extra triangles outside the boundary, which is not correct. And so we'll just go back to our terrain model, and we're going to add to it, and so that's going to come down here to add features to our terrain. And this time what we're going to do is we're going to locate the terrain we just created. And by the way, we can go ahead and get rid of our reference now because our boundary created is in here. So I'm just going to detach this. So we'll say yes. And so now we have our terrain model, and we also have our boundary that's in there. And so we'll go back to our command. We're going to add in our boundary. So we'll locate our terrain model, which is here, and then we want to locate the element to add, which is you can see it right here, the perimeter, and then we'll reset, and I'm going to say that is a boundary, and you'll watch what happens with these triangles. It'll clean them right up. And so now you can see we have an exact match to our mesh where we've added that boundary. And so that's just something you have to do if you're going to make your top proposed surface from your mesh. The next thing we want to take a look at is creating a terrain model from using the graphic filters. And so with the graphic filters we can specify what particular entries we want in there, and that'll allow us then to create a terrain model in that method. And then the last one will be to use the active surface from the template points, and so we'll take a look at that as well. Once we have the terrain model created, doesn't matter which of the 3 methods we create it with, then we can go back to export that terrain to an XML file for machine control. So let's now take a look at how we can create a top proposed surface terrain model using graphic filters. This time we're going to make a terrain model, as I mentioned earlier, from graphical filters. And so what I've done is I've made a brand new 3D file, and I referenced in our project. And what I did was I only referenced in again the default 3D model because that's all I need. And I'm going to proceed to my terrain model tools, and under here is create terrain model by graphical filter. And you can at any time come into your terrain filter manager and review what I set up, but I created one for top surface. And so I come in here to edit and I look at the civil features. I just added all the ones that I know are along the top coming out of my terrain, which seems to be adequate. So we'll finish that, and that's the one that we're going to use. So we just want to go ahead and select that, and we'll pick our top surface. And you can hit preview here at any time. It'll show you what it's going to take into account, and so that looks good. And so we'll just proceed through the prompts. Append to terrain, no, because we're going to create a new one. And we're going to do maximum triangle length, and I'm using 30 on this project. Data point to accept, and you can see then we have our terrain model. And if you wanted to take a look at the contours at any time, you can just select your terrain model, go to your quick properties, and come over here to your feature definition. And example here would be design contours, and then you can review those on your model, and you see it looks very good. So that's a second method of creating a proposed surface terrain model. The last one we want to take a look at is going to be looking at our proposed template and setting up this for alternate surface. In this last example, we're going to work right in the design file itself. It seems to be a requirement when you're creating surfaces from alternate surfaces. So I'm going to take my corridor over to the design stage of final linear features, just to kind of make looking at our view a little bit easier. And so you can see now that we just have our break lines. Also, I'm going to pick my element template here for terrain design, because when you come in and create your alternate surfaces, it's not going to assign any features at the beginning. It's just going to use your MicroStation active symbology. And so the other thing I want to just show you is on the template itself, if I come over to the active template mode and I look at the alternate surfaces, you can see what I did for the alternate surfaces. So all of the end condition points are on the top surface, as well as the top of pavement points. And so you'll see how I did that. So now all we have to do to execute this is just in our terrain model tools, we have an icon here for create corridor alternate surfaces. So we select that, we locate the corridor, and it's going to complete. So you can see now that we have our alternate surfaces created. The one thing that I noticed here when I was doing this is it didn't catch this left side. And that has to do with the fact that we don't really have a boundary that's a continuous boundary that's present. And so all I need to do is just add this left catch point to the terrain model. So I just select my terrain model over here, and then I say add a feature. And then I'm just going to click this feature to add. And then we're going to set it to break void and process, and you'll see now that that's added in. Now that we have our terrain model created, whether it's either of the three methods shown, to get to the XML, we simply select the terrain model, and right on the context sensitive toolbar, you have the ability to export to these formats. And so the example requested was a land XML. And if I look at the land XML, we can see what we can export here and the XML or the export format. Give it a project name and a description if you want to. And then your export options are going to be to do triangles only or features only or both. I'm just going to select features only for this exercise. And so we'll say okay, okay, features only, and then we'll give it a name. So let's say save that.